Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about leaving social media without losing all your clients. We do a lot of things on this show, but lately I think the biggest one, or the one I'm feeling the most, is that we offer you permission and inspiration to create the business of your dreams and to release all the sticky shoulds that come along with launching that show, especially that sticky should of social media. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to Off the Grid. I'm Amelia Fruby. I'm the founder of Softer Sounds Podcast Studio, and as you've likely guessed, the host of this podcast. As always, I want to invite you to download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit. It includes 3 tools that I use to leave social media and launch a business without it, including the very popular list of 100 ways to share your work without social media. You'll find all of that at offthegrid.fun/toolkit or at the link in the show notes. Head there and get the goods for free. So that shared, today I am excited to introduce our first guest of season 3 of the show. Amanda Laird is the founder and principal strategist at Slow and Steady. Since 2008, she has led countless communications projects from concept through launch for small and large businesses, nonprofit organizations, and solopreneurs. As a former holistic nutritionist, Amanda is also an advocate for reproductive health and wellness. She was the host of the Heavy Flow podcast from 2017 to 2020 and is the author of the award-winning Heavy Flow: Breaking the Curse of Menstruation. In her work at Slow and Steady, Amanda draws on her 15 years as a creative communicator, writer, and holistic wellness practitioner, as well as feminist marketing and business frameworks from Kelly Deals, C.V. Harquail, and Jennifer Armbrust, the last of whom is actually how we met when I used to work at Sister before I launched Softer Sounds. So, Amanda, welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here today.
Oh, thank you, Amelia. I'm excited to be here. I am a longtime listener, first time caller, so this is exciting.
Yeah, oh, I love it. I love it. So, let's dive right into the thick of it. As I just shared, you are a marketing strategist, a founder of your own studio. And one of my favorite things that you say about marketing, and I'm quoting you here, marketing feels hard because it is hard and not because you're doing anything wrong. And I love this because it's something I hear a lot from off the grid listeners. And, I can't always relate because I love marketing and sometimes it does feel kind of easy for me. So, can you unpack this for us? What makes marketing so hard and why isn't that our fault?
Oh, we could probably spend the next 2 hours going through this list. So I'm going to try and keep it to my favorite reasons. So yeah, marketing feels hard because it is hard. And I think that a lot of people who are launching their own businesses, they're graphic designers or they're podcast editors or they're launching their creative business, they did not go to school to study marketing and communications, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I did in my post-secondary education. And I find it hard to market my solo business. And I found it hard to do marketing for multinational conglomerates when I worked at a PR agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a skill that needs to be learned and built. And it's not just as easy as throwing up a post on Instagram, right? Marketing always looks easy when we are on the receiving end of these marketing messages. But there's a lot of skill and strategy and thought that goes into it to make it work, right? So that's number one. Maybe this just isn't your area of genius. And so perhaps you are inexperienced or unpracticed. And that's not your fault. And that's just a reality. Also, in the year 2024, we have so much information coming at us as information consumers, right? Everybody is out there telling you about their stuff. We are on social, we get email, we see ads on television, on public transit. Like, we are just bombarded with information, and it's hard to break through, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just a fact, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to break through. I also think that something we don't talk enough about in the kind of solo creative business world is it's never just marketing, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that we need to confront and unpack and nurture and tend to when we are showing up and putting ourselves out there, right? Like, it is incredibly vulnerable to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, buy my thing, right? Like, that is
Mm-hmm.
a difficult thing to do. If we are solo, oftentimes we might conflate our work or our offers with our worth, right? Like, we are too integrated with our business. We don't look at our business as a separate entity that lives outside of ourselves, and we have an inherent worthiness beyond our business.
Mm-hmm.
And if that stuff is kind of tangled up, it can easily kind of like activate some of those stories or fears or wounds that we have around rejection or not being good enough, right? And so I think that's true for anybody. And then if you are living at an intersection of any marginalized identity, if you are disabled, if you're queer, if you're fat, if you're a person of color, if you are all of the above, right? Like, I think it just compounds that, right? And I could go on and on and on. There's many, 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 many more reasons. We're also just very busy as solo business owners. So all of these things make marketing hard.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say maybe there are kind of like four reasons I pulled out while you were sharing. Like, one is that marketing is a skill we have to develop. And it's like an advanced skill. Being good at marketing is an advanced skill, and it takes time to develop that skill. Also, for marketing to get easy, we have to confront a lot of our own wounds around visibility and around worthiness and around asking for support and receiving money in exchange for things that we're doing. Those are a lot of really deep and core wounds for many people that we have to confront in order for marketing to become easy. In addition to these societal levels and structural oppressions that can thwart our visibility, that can mean that we're going to receive a lot of pushback on our marketing or get trolled for our marketing or all sorts of things on those degrees if we're operating on the internet. And then also just the time management piece. Like, in addition to all those things, it also just takes time. And who has enough time these days? I don't know. I don't know anybody who feels
Exactly.
a whole lot of time abundance as a solopreneur. So yeah, that is a lot. So from that starting point, what I love also about your work is you don't just like give us all of that and then be like, good luck. It's hard. Sorry. You've really kind of used that foundation to then create this framework for marketing that you call the Just Enough Marketing Framework. So, can you tell us about that framework? Like, how can we all stop doing too much or too little marketing? And what does just enough marketing look like?
Mm-hmm. I am an elder millennial, geriatric millennial. And so, I built my career on doing the most. And now
Yeah,
I am old and tired, and I want to do just enough and get on with my shows and my crafts.
absolutely.
And that's kind of like the vibe where I'm coming from. And, one of the things that I think makes marketing so tricky is that we always talk about, like, marketing in and of itself is just like too vague a term, right? Like, I will sit down with somebody, a potential client or a new client, and they'll say, like, I know I need to do more marketing. And it's like, okay, but like, what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean. Like you
Mm-hmm.
need to be getting out in front of new audiences more often. You need to be working on your SEO. Does that mean you need to have a way for people to like connect with you? Are you talking about sales actually? Like, what does this vague marketing mean? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I think trips people up and plays into the reason why marketing is hard is like when you don't have a fundamental understanding of like what you are trying to achieve and why, it gets very muddy and it gets very difficult to know what to do, to stick with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have the resiliency to like keep going if it doesn't work right away. And then, if you just know that you have to do more marketing and you don't understand exactly how that's going to benefit your business or what you're trying to do, you're just probably going to start throwing spaghetti, penne, rigatoni, cannelloni, like all of it at the wall to kind of see what sticks. So when I talk about just enough, what I mean is actually like putting down the phone, okay, stepping away from marketing for a minute, taking a deep breath and looking at the big picture, right? We need to start actually, like if you're in this loop where you feel like my marketing's not working, I'm not getting what I want, you need to actually stop thinking about marketing for a second, go back to your business foundations, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is your business? What do you offer? How much does it cost? Who's going to buy it? How do they buy it from you? Like one of the things that I've heard you talk about on this podcast before is like, are you going out with an offer and then you don't have the systems and processes to actually like
Mm-hmm.
buy or sell or fulfill that thing? Like these are fundamentals. And so the problem might not lie in your messaging or your assets or your content. Like that stuff could be really good, but maybe you're not getting out in front of enough new people and attracting new audience members, right? Like maybe the audience that you already have is a little bit cold, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
people have bought what they're going to buy. If you're not constantly kind of getting in front of new people, sometimes the sales can dry up, right? So are you attracting, right? Are you
Mm-hmm.
doing the right type of marketing to attract new people? Are you guesting on a podcast? Are you optimizing your blog post for SEO? There's all kinds of things you can do. And then once people do find you, are you giving them ways to actually connect with you, get to know, like, and trust, right? And oftentimes I find that this is like the layer where people do the most,
Mm-hmm.
do more than they probably have to, because it's like more blogs, more social, more emails, and like all of that stuff is important things that we need in our marketing strategy to give people the information that they need to make a decision about can this person solve my problem? Do I jive with their vibes? What have you. Like that connection piece is almost always there and overinflated when I look
Mm-hmm.
at somebody's marketing. And then here's the good and bad news. You also have to sell, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
sales is also a part of this, right? Marketing doesn't exist to just do marketing, right? That is a hobby. That is an artistic practice, right? But if you are writing these emails, making a podcast, whatever it is that you're doing in service of a business, then your marketing needs to connect into a sales process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not only do you need to have that process exist, like there needs to be like a buy now button or a book a call or a apply to work with me. I'll write you a proposal. You need that process. But you also have to remind people that you are a business and you have things for sale
Mm-hmm.
and invite that sale. Jen Carrington, she refers to it as turning your light on, which I just think is so smart. And you have to turn your light on and say, I'm open for business, and tell people that you have things to buy and provide them with the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to do so.
Yeah, I want to pause us there and just like highlight many of the things that you said. And I know that there's a fourth fun one in your 4 marketing activities, so I promise we won't skip it. But I want actually to go back to the very beginning of what you said and just kind of like quote unquote double click on this for people, because I heard you say like clients often come to you and say, I need to do more marketing. Or even the way you said it, it's kind of like they're like, won't make eye contact. And they're like, I know I need to do more marketing. Like, I'm aware. That sort
Mm-hmm.
of like under your breath thing. And what I love in your response is like, I actually think most people don't need to do more marketing. I think you would agree. What's happening is they're doing too much marketing in some of these stages and not enough marketing in these other phases of the customer client journey.
Mm-hmm.
And even before we get into that, like I actually think when people say, I need to do more marketing, what they actually mean is, I want to make more money. Like that's really, it's
Yes.
like, I'm not making enough money. And they think that if they just market more, they'll make more money. And let me tell you, in my own firsthand experience, that's just not true. Like you can send the best, most beautiful, most perfect emails to an audience that's just already like, everybody in there who's going to buy from you has bought from you. And if you just keep sending those emails, like you can do more, but it's not going to translate into making more money, like no matter what you do, because you're just connecting over and over and over again with maybe not a cold audience, but like a tapped out audience, like one
Mm-hmm.
who's not buying more from you. And I have felt this in my own experience, like trying to sell my podcast launch course to my list or other things. Like the list isn't growing and I can't just keep selling to them. I'm not going to make more money just by doing more marketing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And also, like, another piece to underscore, though, as well, as like marketing takes time as well.
Mm,
So I can share an example from my own launch and from my own business. And I had, this was happening to me, right? Where like I'm sending the beautiful, perfect email, and like, why am I not selling out? And so my hypothesis was that I had a cold audience, and that the people who were in my audience had bought everything that they were going to buy, and I needed to find a new audience to fill out my spots. I had 3 one-on-one mentorship spots to fill. And so I went out and created a campaign. I bought ads because I was trying to do it fast. So I went ads because I didn't have time to cultivate relationships to pitch myself for podcasts. So I went the ad route, and I used like the tried and true launch formula, freebie webinar into a sales sequence, automated sales sequence. And I sold 3 spots. I wanted to sell 3 spots. I sold 3 spots, brought on 3 new clients. And after I did that, when it was done, I went through my sales sequence, and I literally went through each email, who clicked on what, these new clients that I brought in, when did they subscribe to my list, how did they find me, what was their behavior? And I was so wrong. I was so wrong. Of those 3 new clients, I think I met with 8. I sent out 4 proposals, and then I got 3 clients from that, which that's pretty great.
that's a
But then
great conversion rate.
when I went back and looked at it, only one of them was new. One person had been on my email list for 400 days between subscribing to closing the contract. 400 days. That's more than a year. Plus, I met them a year before they got on my list. And the second client had been on my list for 198 days and had clicked on my offer 17 times before she even booked a call. So this goes back to like business foundations as well. Like, what are you selling?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because think about like your sales, like think about your buyer's experience if you're buying a candle, right? It smells good. It's in my budget. Sure, I'm going to buy it. The greatest risk here is maybe it doesn't burn clean and I don't like it. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'll give it away. The one peach candle that travels around the world, right?
Yeah.
But you're selling like a one-on-one partnership, coaching, service that especially if you're selling into like fellow small businesses, like anytime I make an investment into like a service or coaching or support, like that's a big investment for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a big investment. And so I'm not going to buy into that offer in the same way that I'm going to buy a candle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I need to know that you understand me. I need to know that our values align. I need to know that you can help solve my problem. And it needs to be the right time
Mm-hmm.
for me too. Like, honestly, I feel like when it comes to like B2B service providers,
Mm-hmm.
so much of it comes down to being in the right place and at the right time when that
Mm-hmm.
person is ready to buy. And like when I think about my little campaign case study, right? Like it just so happens that that one customer that one client who found me through an ad, went through my sales sequence and ended up to buy, like she was actually already at a stage where she was looking to
Mm-hmm.
work with somebody and she had the money and she had the enthusiasm and it was the right time.
Yeah.
Right? Those other two, I had to wait 400 days for those stars to align. Right?
Yeah. And I think you just pointed to some really important things in there. Like, one is that your marketing needs to align with your model. And this is something I talked about last season with Jessica Lackey, which is, if you're a strategist, a coach, like a sort of high touch service provider, it will take longer often for people to book with you. And so, when you're doing your math of how many clients you need at any given time, you need to do some forecasting, right? Of like, okay, it could take a year or more for someone who lands on my list to book with me because of this timing piece. That's very different than perhaps, an e-commerce, I'm selling a product that costs less than $50 cycle where you are working to capture people much more quickly. Because it's kind of like either they're going to want it or they're not. If we don't grab their attention and get them sort of on board with our candles or whatever it may be, maybe they'll totally forget about it. Like, the attention cycle is different, the timeline is different, and the methods that you use are different, as well as just like the amount of people that you need in your audience or community at any given time so that you feel like your business is supported financially. Those are also very different. You need to sell way more $25 candles than $2,500, coaching packages or $25,000 graphic design proposals, right? Like those numbers are very different. And I think that just speaking to all of this is yet again an invitation for listeners to think about the type of business that you run. A big part of that conversation is like, what are your zones of genius? And also, how much money do you want or need to make? And when you design offerings, those things need to come together along with what type of marketing will be required to sell this thing. Because something I just keep speaking to over and over again on this show is I think too many people launch the type of offering that needs a large audience while also knowing they never want to build a large audience. And so, if you're trying to make a living off of selling $100 course, but you've never had an email list that has more than 100 people on it, your maximum earning potential sending those emails to that list is not going to be super high. And so, once again, I feel like we're just back to this place of like intention and alignment for your model and your marketing and your offerings. And I just think that's so important. And that takes us back to how we can do just enough, because doing just enough means being, to me, really clear on what's your model, what type of marketing does that require, and are you doing that type of marketing and only that type of marketing? So for instance, I can share, I did a session with you at the end of last year where I was like, I don't think I need to send emails. Because Softer Sounds is a referral based business. I was like, I'm doing all this content marketing, but content marketing doesn't sell podcast editing packages. It sells maybe podcast launch courses. I have a low cost launch course, and content marketing can bring people into that. But the editing work is really always sells through referral, occasionally through some SEO searching that people are doing. Specifically, like if you search Feminist Podcast Studio, you're going to find Softer Sounds. There aren't a lot of us out there. So things like that I've noticed where it actually has allowed me to step back and say, oh, I was doing too much. I can pull back to just enough. I don't need to be sending multiple emails a month to this list I have, because it's not my priority right now is to raise my revenue, and that's not really working toward that goal. I'm just nurturing this audience that's already getting a lot of free support from me. And I think that both of us here are speaking to that sort of too much moment. And then I also want to invite in the people who have that experience of doing too little marketing, because and this to me comes down also to like marketing and sales, because I love Jen's like turn the light on advice. And then sometimes I also think people turn the light on and then they never actually sell. Like they say like, I got an offering, here it is. And you put it like in the PS of an email, but you never send any sales messaging about like, what problem does this solve for people? What makes your solution to this problem unique or beautiful or exciting or specific to you and who you serve? And like, why is now the time that people should want to do this with you? Like those, I think, are like 3 sales emails you should send every time after you turn the light on. I mean, not should, but like that's a great way to just break it down and go from just like, I have this thing available for purchase, to selling it. And I know that can feel weird or manipulative, or there's a lot of critiques of coercive sales, and I agree with them. But I think the fear around that shouldn't hold you back from doing any selling. Like you do have to sell. You can't just say you have a product available. Because even if you say that a lot of times, if you're never helping people along the path to understanding if that product or service is for them, they're not going to go any farther than being like, cool, Amelia's got a new podcast workshop up there. Like good for her, you know?
Exactly. 100%, and if I can be my own best client and think about my own campaign, right? Like when I looked at the data, I'm like, that's another thing, right? Like, look at the data. It will tell you the truth, right? About what is actually happening and what works. And when I think about, I was shocked. Actually, I was flabbergasted to see that these new clients had been on my list for as long as they had, because I was totally convinced that like, well, I told them. It was like, no, I don't know why I'm using my bro voice there. Like, I told them that I have this thing for sale. Like, they knew, but I wasn't, like, to your point. Yeah, I told them, but I did not give them the follow up, right? I didn't tell them how I could help, like how this is going to help them, how it's going to help transform their business, where they can expect to be in 4 months' time. I wasn't telling that, I wasn't telling them that. And so I had done the attraction, I had done the connection, and that's when it flips into sales, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once people are listening, okay, I'm here, I'm listening. I like you. I open your email newsletter every week. I'm clicking on the links. You need to kind of take it. You need to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just here to say, for anyone who's feeling hesitant around that, like on the receiving end, I honestly generally appreciate being sold to on a list that I've opted into because often I don't know if their thing is for me. I need help discerning if it's right for me or if now is the right time. And I might click through and read their sales page, kind of, like skim it because I get a lot of emails every day. But like, if they're not taking the time to take me on that journey from like, I sort of know what you do to like, I really want to work with you, like, that's your job as the business owner. Like, you got to get me to buy that candle. You got to get me to book that call with you. And like, it's not my job as your potential client or customer to do all that work. It's yours. And I'm just here to say, like, I appreciate when people do that for me, like on the receiving end. And I think that as business owners, we have to step into that mindset of sales. And for me, again, it's really like we're just helping people decide if this is right for them. It's a journey of discernment. There's nothing manipulative or coercive about that in and of itself. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to use those tactics of scarcity, of time sensitivity, of FOMO. Like those are all ways that our sales can become coercive, but the discernment piece, I don't think that's inherently manipulative at all. I think it's really helpful. And it helps me feel better about selling when I remember like, okay, I don't have to do it in those ways. I can do it in my way, that I find is like really just helpful and supportive. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that
I
feels really true.
I think to add to the list of reasons why marketing feels hard, I think, your listeners are probably very rooted in their values, lead with their values, are not trying to create an empire that's exploitive and extractive, right? And so I think one of the things that makes it difficult for whatever you want to say, a conscious entrepreneur, values led, a feminist entrepreneur, just somebody who's not trying to do business as usual, however they might
Mm-hmm.
identify or call themselves. Like, one of the things that can make marketing that much more difficult is when they think about marketing or they think about sales, like it's those sense of urgency,
Mm-hmm.
the sales that really prey on those soft and tender parts of you not being good enough. And if you just buy the thing, you'll be richer, smarter, hotter, thinner, whatever, right? And like
Yeah.
those, we are exposed to those messages 1,000 times an hour, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to run your business in that way, if you are, you don't want to be coercive, you don't want to be manipulative, it can be difficult then to know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I hope that you will join my email list. And if you never buy anything from me, I hope I can just inspire you to do things in a different way. Like as an example of how you can do it in a different way. And yeah, so that's my thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's a really good reminder. And that you kind of got underneath where the reason I was kind of talking so much about this, which is that so often the reason that you and I, and the people listening to this podcast, start a business is because we want to lead with our values. We want to be more sovereign in how we earn money. We want to support people who often aren't supported by these larger businesses or structures. And then we see the practices other people are doing, but we're like, I can't just do that because I know why it's problematic, but like, what do I do instead?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the examples you just gave and the many ways we've kind of talked through doing just enough marketing that I think share like different opportunities for people to do things their own way. And as I said at the very beginning, like to release those shoulds, to let go of some of the, pathways that are well tread or that are taught all over the place about quote unquote how to 10x your whatever, how to make $1,000 this week, whatever it might be, like letting go of all of that and really leaning into, to me, at the end of the day, it's like leaning into knowing your people and knowing what's going to resonate for them and speaking to them clearly and generously in that way. And that will look different for everyone. And I think that leads me into circling way back to the fourth sort of aspect of marketing that we talked about. So to recap, to remind listeners, because we like took a whole detour since you were talking about this. In your marketing, in the Just Enough marketing method, you talk about doing marketing activities that attract, connect, and convert potential clients or customers. This definitely maps onto the framework that I use on this show of grow your audience, nurture your community, sell your offers. As this interview comes out, we're in the middle of a series talking about that. So listeners, like there's a whole episode on 24 ways to attract, 24 ways to connect, 24 ways to convert. That's all happening on the show as we speak. But you also add a fourth one that I love.
Mm.
And the fourth sort of goal of marketing activities can be to delight. So can you tell me, why did you include delight in your framework, and like what are some examples of delightful marketing activities?
Mm. Yeah, those are the fun ones. And I will say, as a client of yours, you're good at this one as
Oh,
well.
thank you.
You're good at delight. I mean, delight really plugs into relationship building, right? And relationships. And, when somebody has become your client, right, you have an opportunity to create loyalty and have them keep coming back to you, right? And think about how hard it was to bring that client to you, like through the attraction, the connection, and the conversion piece. Now you have them. They bought
Mm-hmm.
something, right? Like how many times, using like an example like a candle, right? Like how many, like think about your house, like you just buy the same thing at the grocery, the same box of cereal or the same loaf of bread or the same almond milk or whatever every week at the grocery store because you like it, it works, and like it did what it was supposed to do, right? So you've
Mm-hmm.
created that brand loyalty, and that's like a lot easier than trying to be like, hey, come on over here. And so it's in your best interest as a business owner to create customers that keep coming back to you, right? Like at the risk of using a gross corporate term, like that's the low hanging fruit, like
Mm-hmm.
marketing people will say like it's easier to keep a client than to find a new client. And that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So delight them, right? And actually that starts with being really good at your job
Yeah.
and doing the thing that you said you were going to do. So if you promise to 10x their revenue, then 10x their revenue, and they are going to come back to you every time they want to do that thing, right? And they're going to talk about you when you're not around and tell their friends, and they're going to refer you, and now they're doing their marketing for you, right? So and that takes some pressure off you. And delight is stuff, I think, like having a nice and or like an easy, seamless like intake process, right? Like that goes into delight. It was
Mm-hmm.
so easy to work with you, right? And then it's like little treats, right? Like a postcard in the mail, a thank you, shouting out your clients in your newsletter, right? Like these are just little things that are actually the easier things to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like just being nice and delightful to your clients, right? Are going to go such a long way. And it is an important part of your strategy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Delight is one of my favorite parts of the client's retention process or of the marketing process at large. I feel like things we do at Softer Sounds, just to list off more ideas for people. We have an annual client appreciation party where I make a presentation of client superlatives and we go through all the shows we work on and everybody gets a little like cute award and like a pretty slide they can share if they want to. I send a card every time a new client comes on. They get a postcard from me with a handful of stickers that only go to clients that are very cute. We have a lot of playlists that I send out at various times. We have a clients only newsletter that goes out once a month with both like updates they need to know, like we're going to take a break for the winter, or like, and fun things like, here's the best thing I've listened to all month that we didn't produce. You're going to love it. Things like that. So I think just simple things. I love gifts. We send birthday cards to clients. Like this is just stuff I like to
Mm-hmm.
do because
Mm-hmm.
I love the gift giving is one of the love languages I like to provide. So like that makes it easy for me in this sense of like it's very natural instinct. Um, but I also will say too, like depending on the type of business you run, will determine the type of delights that are appropriate. So
Yes. And delight cannot be sacrificing, attracting, connecting, or converting. Also, do not be putting all of your effort into a client only newsletter when you only need to have 4 clients. That is not the best use of your time. Sending them
absolutely.
an email every couple weeks, every couple months to say, hey, how are you? How's life? Is going to be a lot easier.
Absolutely. And like I have definitely had experiences too where like the delight felt like too much. Like I just want to caution people like to keep in mind your own economics when you're providing delightful things. I love cards because they cost not that much to buy or send. I use a
Mm-hmm,
service
mm-hmm.
called Postable that has a client address book. It has very affordable, beautiful cards I can just type in and ship off to my clients for a couple bucks. Like things like that that fit within your pricing structure and your profit structure and feel really good to people to receive. And I think that those are like that, you know, it's just some of the fun stuff that you can do.
Do
So
just enough.
yeah, just enough. Exactly. And it can be free and it can be easy. I was just saying on another podcast episode that I just purchased something from a shop called Bando. And when they sent me
Mm.
the receipt, at the very top of the receipt, it's like, we made a fun page of free stuff for you. And it's just a URL where they have like free coloring pages and like planner pages and sorts of different tracking devices and stuff. And they only have to put it together once and they just send it in every like thank you for your purchase email. And that was such a fun way to get me back onto their website to think about maybe buying something else, right? So simple things
Yeah.
like that are a part of delighting and retaining your clients and customers in any, you know, setting. Just
I have another good, delightful
yes.
example. So, full disclosure, she was a slow and steady client. Um, However, I would have bought this thing. I bought it with my own money, and I would have bought it anyways. And it was from a company called Knitted Bliss, and she makes embroidery kits.
Mm.
And she includes her little piece of delight is she includes a needle minder, which if you are not a needlepoint person is like a little magnet that you can stick to your hoop and you stick your needle to it so it doesn't get lost, and it's in her logo. And that is just such a like, first of all, I didn't know that these existed, and my couch is filled with needles, much to my family's chagrin. So I was like, wow, incredible. And now, I finished the kit that she made months ago, but I use that needle minder every day on all my
Mm-hmm.
other projects. And now she's top of mind for me too. So the next time I am looking for a project, I am looking for a kit, or somebody asks me about a kit, she's going to be top of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's just that, like, staying with people, delighting them is a way of staying with them. And the more, like, the longer our client relationships are, the more sustainable our business becomes, I think,
Yeah.
no matter what type of business that you have. And so I just want to see more delight in our marketing and in our lives
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. Totally.
So I want to wrap us up with 2 questions about social media.
Mm.
So, first of all, I know that you help your clients with social media strategy. And while Off the Grid is a podcast about leaving social media, lots of Off the Grid listeners are still on Instagram, TikTok, X, wherever they may be. And they're just coming here for ways to learn to do marketing that aren't social media centric. So I can't help them with that, but I think you can. So can you tell us, like, just some thoughts on how do you do just enough social media marketing?
Oh, that could be another 2 hours, Amelia. I mean, it goes back to following that framework, right? Thinking about what kind of business do you run? um, and who are your clients? And what is your sales process? What is your buyer's journey? And then what role does social media play in that? And you have to, I think, be super clear on, are you using social media to attract new people? Are you using social media to connect with them? And I know more and more and more, especially with, service providers, which is most of my clients are service providers, like social media, unless you are really investing time, energy, and money into creating content, boosting content, unless you are an influencer piece,
Mhm.
um, it's really hard to attract a new audience. And
Mhm.
so is that your primary goal and objective for using social media? Question mark. Because what I'm finding more and more is when I and like if we were having this conversation, I feel like even like 2 years ago, it would be like, yeah, social media, a great place to attract new clients, right? But it's just not the reality. Um, And so maybe thinking of it more as a connection strategy, right? My mind in particular goes to like Instagram. Um, I have a complicated relationship with the gram, as so many of us do, personally and
Mhm.
professionally. But one of the realities is when I hear about a business or I hear about a person, like I look them up on Instagram,
Mhm.
right? Um and so I didn't discover them there, but now I'm looking at their content, I'm looking through their Instagram as a way to connect with them. Is this a person that I want to hear more from, stay in touch with, learn more about the business? And so more and more I'm looking at it more as a connection piece, and I want people to do just enough as well. Like, I think if you are writing blogs or newsletters or creating a podcast, I don't think you need to then like do something else for social, right? Like, think of it
Mhm.
as an amplification tool. You can take, I mean, this is a common strategy. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but you can take larger pieces of content and then kind of shrink them down and chunk them out and use them on social media and other places. And that seems to be what's kind of working in the framework these days.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So use it for connection, use it to repurpose content. I'm also still hearing people be like, just hang out in stories. Feed posts are
Totally.
dead.
Totally.
this is all things I get like third or fourth hand through the ether. But I think those are like really easy, straightforward pieces of advice. And just like, I think as you're kind of speaking to, like, be really aware of how much time you're spending there and be really aware that it's probably not making you money in the immediate moment. Like, no, like our connection activities are often for long-term plans. And so have
Exactly.
that in mind while you're investing time on any social platform.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, I haven't been actively even posting on social media. However, when I have a connection call or discovery call with somebody and maybe we're thinking about working together, I'll follow them on social and I will like the post. I will comment. I see something else, I will send it to them, right? It's like an
Mm-hmm.
easy way. Like if that's where your clients are, it's an easy way to keep in touch with them there. Like it might be weird for me to send them a gift in the mail, right? But I can certainly keep in touch with them on social, and that's easy. But the first question too is like also be honest, right? Be honest about how you're like why you're using social media and is it working? Because what I often see as well is like what I call the panic posting cycle, where it's like
Mm.
you're fretting about something in your business, you feel like it's not working, you're in the feels, you're probably ovulating if you menstruate, and you're like questioning everything and you're like, oh my God, it's not working. I need to like do marketing or I need to do more
Mm-hmm.
marketing. So then you just throw something up. There's no strategy behind it. It doesn't connect in with your sales process. Then it doesn't work and now you feel worse. And like sometimes I think we also get stuck into like making content, and particularly for social, and it makes us feel really busy and it feels like we're like working so hard on our business, but it's actually not doing anything, kind of like procrastinating and things like that, when we could actually be, delighting our clients or doing in-person networking, or depends on your business.
Yeah. Yeah. So no panic posting is perhaps
Yes.
a good resolution for 2024 if
Yes.
you're still on social media. And my last question kind of speaks to that if you're still on social media bit, because last year we had, I think, a really great conversation about this sort of prompt that had sparked you of, is leaving social media a privilege? So as we wrap up, can we talk a little bit more about this? Like, can you tell listeners like what spurred that question for you and how are you
Mm.
thinking about it today?
Yeah, so that was a comment on a Substack newsletter. I went back and the commenter never responded to my comment. So we have no way of knowing what this person was actually trying to say, or they did not engage back with me. But um, I love Virginia Sole-Smith. She is an author. She has a great Substack newsletter called Burnt Toast. She has a great podcast, and she came from the world of traditional publishing, and now she makes her living off of Substack. And one of the reasons why I love Virginia so much is because she's very transparent around her business operations and is very generous, sharing kind of like what works for her and her learnings and her experience. And so last year, she wrote a newsletter that was like, yeah, I've decided to do just enough on social media, right? Like, I'm no longer looking at that as part of my marketing strategy. I'm not deleting my account. I'm not leaving social media. I'm literally doing the bare minimum, because what she learned was it's not a revenue generating activity for her, right? That's not where
Mm-hmm.
people find her Substack, not bringing people into her Substack. It's not converting them into paid readers. It just was not the thing that was working, right?
Yeah.
And there was a commenter had said, well, I think it's a privilege to, like, it's good for you. But I think it's a privilege to be able to use social media. Now, like I said, I did respond and I said, well, actually, I think you have a lot more agency than you think you do. And the original poster did not respond. So I think we're kind of imagining what we don't know for sure what they meant. But what I think they were trying to say is, like, for Virginia, who has, she's making 6 figures off of her Substack. She has the support of Substack. They, helped produce the first year of her podcast. She has publishing deals with, like, big 5 publishers. She has a deep network, large followers. Like, yeah, for sure, it's easy for you to leave social media and if you don't need social media to get your work out, well, that's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And to which I say, well, like, using burnt toast as the example, like, Virginia, it doesn't make her money. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
that's not where she's finding her paying subscribers, right? Yes, maybe, I subscribe to her newsletter. I also follow her on Instagram. So maybe there is a connection, relationship building piece there. But she's taken the time to build an audience outside of social media, So is it a privilege to not be using social media to find her work? Like, I don't think that's really what we're talking about here. Like,
Yeah, it's something I've also seen Anne Friedman say more directly, like acknowledge that she seems to agree or believe it's a privilege to not be active on social media. And it's something I often, like, in both of those instances, that's coming from sort of journalists who have been in their field for a long time, had book deals, and like have built, as you mentioned, like very deep networks. And for me, this sort of question of is leaving social media a privilege? Well, depends on how you're looking at it. So I think, like, for many people, using social media is a privilege. Having a phone or internet connection that can use social media is in itself privileged if we're thinking about this on like a global scale. So then from that position, well, you're privileged enough to be on it now, like, and you're going to leave it, like you're going to abandon that. Like, that's one way we could look at this conversation. But often when it comes up, and I think this was part of what we originally talked about, and it's in the blog post you wrote about this that I'll link to in the show notes, is like, often when people are sort of seeing someone do something like this and they point to it and say, like, well, that's a privilege you have, I think beneath that is like, that I don't have. And I'm not speaking to this original commenter. This is now like more universal. I've seen this conversation happen a lot of times. But it's like, I think it comes out of fear. That's part of what you wrote in your blog post, is like, I don't want to be on social, but I have to be because I don't have the career you have that I'm now identifying as your privilege. And I think that that just flattens a lot of the conversation. And part of why I wanted to bring it here is because what I'm trying to do on this show is invite people to just expand their imagination of what's possible for them. And is leaving social media a privilege? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think that's really a helpful lens through which to view that decision most of the time, because I don't think we have an obligation to be on social media. And I do not believe social media is the only way to grow a career, unless perhaps your goal is to be an influencer. And then you probably want to pick a platform and go with it. But any other career I think you can have without using social media. Well, maybe not social media strategist, but those are my two. Influencer, social media strategist. But it's like, you just have to get creative. You have to imagine other ways. I see so many people say, I can't get a book deal if I'm not on social media. You can. it might take longer. It might feel harder. You might not be sure how to do it because no one's giving you a clear path forward for that. But it is possible, because I know lots of people who have gotten book deals without large social media followings, myself included. And I just
Also
think,
myself.
yeah, exactly. Both of us included. And so I think that this question for me just becomes this invitation into like, we have to look at what we're afraid of, and then we have to look at what we really want, and we have to believe that more is possible for us, and we have to like expand our imagination on how to get from here to there and come up with new ways of doing it that other people may not be doing. But I think that so often we just try to turn to that like pre-paved path, which is like, if I follow, it's such a like, in my opinion, like academic tendency to be like, well, if I just, or like we're trained into it in school, right? If I just do these 6 assignments, then I'll get the A at the end. If I just take these 6 steps, one of which is social media, I will get a book deal at the end. And it's like, we have to get off those paths. And to me, this question, is leaving social media a privilege? It's just so entrenched in those paths. And I want us to like dream differently, I guess. That's my little like rant and response to your many wise thoughts on this.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I mean, where my mind goes when I'm thinking about this too is like, if you are doing something that you don't want to do and you feel like you have to, right? You're not benefiting from this. Who is?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you feel that way because Mark Zuckerberg wants you to feel that way, right?
Yes.
Like, in that blog post that you referenced, I quoted, I forget who said it or where I saw it. It's referenced in the post, but like social media, like we use social media, we rely on social media because it's addictive, not because it's useful,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and it's designed to make you feel like something is going to happen if you aren't here, right? Like you're going to miss out on the funny meme, or you're going to miss out on the 5-figure launch, or you're going to miss out on whatever, right? And like, it's in these platforms' best interests, right? Or the people who are also selling, like, you know, the 10x your following in 10 days challenge, right? Like, you're on social media, it's not making you money, you don't want to be here, but you're afraid because you're hearing other people tell you that, no, really, you need to be here. Well, if you're not making money and you hear somebody else is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, I hate to always break it down to the systems, but like
No, it's very real.
that's by design, right?
Yeah.
That the system is working as designed.
Yeah, exactly. It's entrapment of its own kind. And I
Yeah,
just think like,
definitely.
you know, that fear of FOMO, that fear of missing out. If you leave social media, are you going to miss out? Yes. But you're not just going to miss out on cool, fun stuff. You're going to miss out on a lot of really like extractive, manipulative, gross stuff too. And anything that you're missing there are other ways to get and find it. You may have to be a little creative and how you get your memes. But you know what? I haven't been on social media in almost 3 years, and I still look at memes every day in other
You
places.
still got my reference to the peach candle,
Yes.
right?
See? So
So
yes, I'm not fully like divorced from all of it. Do I sometimes fully miss a reference? Absolutely. Do I sometimes laugh at somebody saying something that's totally a meme and I think they invented it? Absolutely. But like, it's fine. I can be a little embarrassed. I don't need to have shame around that. Like, to me, leaving social media is actually an invitation to root out FOMO, like kind of entirely from our subconscious and conscious experience. And life is like way better without it, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely. You know, one last thought on social media, because yeah, social media and I are it's a bad relationship. It's on again, off again, right? But when I trace back, like, since the inception of Slow and Steady, right? When I first launched Slow and Steady in 2022, like, I had been listening to Off the Grid the whole time I was like building that business. And I was like, we do not use social media. Like, I am not going on social media. And then, I launched the business and things were okay. And then things weren't going as fast as I wanted them to. And I had a following from Heavy Flow. And so it made sense for me to reach into that audience to say, here, this is what I'm doing now. And then what ended up happening was actually I got a lot of clients, and it worked, right? And then I started to feel that fear, right? Of like, oh, well, actually it works for my business. It is bringing me clients. It is helping to get people onto my list. And so I did keep using it. But when I think back about the times where I felt like the most aligned, where I felt like everything was clicking, where I was creative and was able to generate a lot of ideas and really kind of go for it, were actually the times where I had made a conscious decision to take a social media break. And I find that my business actually works better, or I feel more rooted and grounded and steady in my business, more resourced as an individual to actually show up in my business when I'm not looking at social media and looking at what other business advisors and marketing people are doing. And what I have found is that, I'm not immune to that fear either, right? And when I start to feel wobbly, I do the panic post myself, right? It's
we all do all the things. Yes. We know to advise not to do them because we have done them. That's the only way you know.
Exactly. Or, I will go to social media to do research because actually I'm feeling there's something happening inside of me, Amanda, the person, and not necessarily even the business. And then I'll turn to social media to do research or get inspired. But then actually I just feel like more shit than I did before.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I can relate to that from my past experiences on social media. And even now, I do a lot of like looking to other podcasts for planning and inspiration. And I can get, it's less common that I get stuck in those compare and despair spirals, but it's not that it never ever happens. But I would say, like, when I was on social media, I feel like that was a frequent experience of engagement there. And it's just not so much a part of my life anymore. Now that when I'm researching or engaging with other people, I'm engaging with like longer form things that they're creating, which helps pull me out of that just like really quick drop into the spiral of like, wow, this is amazing and my work sucks and why would I ever bother to make it ever again? Just
right?
That's the inner monologue going on there.
Yeah, I've had the same, right? Like that doubt gremlin has taken residency in my own brain.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Amanda, if folks want to stay in touch with you and your work, what are the best ways and places that they can find you and connect?
Well, thank you for asking. They can find me at slowandsteady.studio. I send a newsletter every Friday. That's my consistent piece of content. And when you get to my website, you can click on Start Here, and that will give you my Just Enough Strategy Toolkit, which has a training and a planner and all that good stuff.
Beautiful. Those will certainly be linked in the show notes. I hope that everyone goes and finds them. They're like great the toolkit's a great resource that I have used myself. Well, Thank you so much for being here, Amanda. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on this just enough of a conversation. Got a little long, just enough plus a little of a conversation. I'm so grateful that you're here. As always, you can find more show notes and more support from the show at offthegrid.fun. And until next time, we will see you beautiful people off the grid.